Have you ever wondered what it would be like to sail the treacherous seas, raid distant lands, and carve out a legacy that would echo through the ages? The Viking Age was a time of exploration, conquest, and larger-than-life characters who shaped the course of history. But what can we learn from these fierce warriors and explorers? How can their stories of ambition, courage, and innovation inspire us today? Join me on an epic journey through time as we uncover the tales of the most famous Vikings in history. By the end of this video, you'll not only know their stories but also understand how their legacy continues to influence our world. Are you ready to unleash your inner Viking? Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking. Picture this. A tall, rugged man with piercing blue eyes and long, braided hair stands at the prow of a longship, his gaze fixed on the horizon. This is Ragnar Lothbrok, a name that echoes through the annals of Viking history and legend. But who was Ragnar, really? Was he a single historical figure, or a composite of several legendary warriors? The truth, my friends, is as elusive as the northern lights. Ragnar Lothbrok, whose name means hairy breeches, first appears in the sagas as a Danish king and fearsome warrior. But here's where it gets interesting. Many historians believe that Ragnar may not have been a single person, but rather a combination of several historical figures whose deeds were woven together into one legendary tale. One of the most famous stories about Ragnar involves his clever defeat of a giant snake. As a young man, Ragnar heard of a king who had promised his daughter's hand in marriage to anyone who could slay a venomous serpent guarding her tower. Ragnar, ever the innovator, dipped his clothes in tar and sand, creating a primitive form of armor. This ingenious solution allowed him to defeat the snake and win the princess, earning him the nickname Lothbrok, or Hairy Breeches. But Ragnar's ambitions extended far beyond slaying mythical beasts. He set his sights on the rich lands of England and France, leading daring raids that would cement his place in history. In 845, Ragnar allegedly led a fleet of 120 ships up the Seine River, laying siege to Paris itself. Now, imagine yourself in Ragnar's shoes for a moment. You're facing the towering walls of Paris, a city that seems impregnable. What do? Well, if you're Ragnar Lothbrok, you come up with an audacious plan. According to the tales, Ragnar feigned his own death, requesting to be baptized before he passed. When the city gates opened to allow this final rite, Ragnar and his men sprang into action, catching the defenders completely off guard. This story, whether true or embellished, exemplifies the cunning and daring that made Ragnar a legend. It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective solution to a problem isn't brute force, but clever thinking and the willingness to take calculated risks. Ragnar's raids weren't just about plunder, though. They were also about exploration and expanding the Viking world. His expeditions paved the way for future Viking settlements in England and France, forever changing the course of European history. But perhaps Ragnar's greatest legacy was his sons. BJORN Ironside, IVAR the Boneless, Hvitserk, and Ubba. These names would go on to become legendary in their own right. Together, they would lead the great heathen army, a massive Viking force that would conquer much of England and strike fear into the hearts of Anglo-Saxon kings. The story of Ragnar's death is as dramatic as his life. According to the sagas, he was captured by King Ella of Northumbria and thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. Even in his final moments, Ragnar remained defiant, supposedly declaring how the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. This cryptic statement was a warning. Ragnar knew his sons would seek revenge, which they did in spectacular fashion. So, what can we learn from Ragnar's tale? First and foremost, it's a reminder of the power of legend. Whether Ragnar existed as a single person or not, his story inspired generations of Vikings and continues to captivate us today. It's a testament to the enduring appeal of the bold, the daring, and the innovative. But on a more personal level, Ragnar's story challenges us to think outside the box. When faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, are we willing to don our own hairy breeches and find creative solutions? Are we ready to sail into uncharted waters, knowing that great rewards often come with great risks? In your own life, what walls of Paris are you facing? What innovative strategies could you employ to overcome them? Remember, sometimes the most effective approach isn't a frontal assault, but a clever feint that catches your obstacles off guard. And finally, Ragnar's legacy reminds us of the importance of the stories we leave behind. Long after we're gone, it's our tales, whether strictly true or somewhat embellished, that will inspire future generations. What story are you writing with your life? What legends will you leave for those who come after? Ragnar Lothbrok, whether man or myth, embodies the Viking spirit of adventure, innovation, and fearlessness. BJORN Ironside, the Mediterranean raider. Imagine standing on the deck of a Viking longship, the salt spray stinging your face as you gaze out at the unfamiliar coastline. The sun beats down, far hotter than anything you've experienced in the fjords of Scandinavia. This is the world of Bjorn Ironside, son of Ragnar Lothbrok and a Viking who truly embodied the spirit of exploration and adventure. Bjorn, whose nickname Ironside speaks to his reputation as a formidable warrior, wasn't content with raiding the familiar shores of England and France. No, Bjorn set his sights on a prize that must have seemed almost mythical to his fellow Norsemen, the glittering cities of the Mediterranean. But before we dive into Bjorn's Mediterranean adventures, let's consider for a moment what it meant to be a Viking explorer in the 9th century. Navigation was based on the stars, the sun, and intimate knowledge of sea currents and bird migrations. There were no GPS systems, no reliable maps of distant shores. Every voyage into unknown waters was a leap of faith, a test of skill and courage against the capricious seas. Now, picture Bjorn and his fleet setting sail from their Scandinavian homeland. They would have hugged the coastline of Western Europe, navigating through the Strait of Gibraltar, the gateway to the Mediterranean. For a people accustomed to the cold, rough waters of the North Atlantic, the calm, azure waters of the Mediterranean must have seemed like sailing into a dream. According to the sagas, Bjorn and his brother Halfdan led a fleet that raided the coasts of Spain, France, and Italy. But it's one particular tale that truly captures the audacity and cunning of these Viking raiders. The story goes that Bjorn and Halfdan arrived at the city of Luna in northern Italy. Now, Luna was not their original target. They had set out to sack Rome, the heart of the Christian world. But, mistaking Luna for Rome, or perhaps as some suggest, pretending to make this mistake, they hatched an ingenious plan. Bjorn sent word to the city that the fleet's chieftain had died and, on his deathbed, had converted to Christianity. They requested permission to bury him within the city walls. The unsuspecting citizens of Luna agreed, even allowing a funeral procession to enter the city. But this was no ordinary funeral. The dead chieftain was none other than Bjorn himself, very much alive and playing possum. At the critical moment, Bjorn leapt from his coffin. His warriors threw off their mourning cloaks to reveal weapons, and they swiftly overwhelmed the city's defenses. This tale, whether entirely true or embellished over time, exemplifies the Viking combination of daring, cunning, and adaptability. Bjorn and his men weren't just brute force raiders, they were clever strategists who could improvise and deceive when necessary. But Bjorn's story doesn't end with his Mediterranean raids. Eventually, he returned to Sweden, where he became a powerful ruler. This transition from raider to ruler marks an important shift in Viking culture. It represents the beginning of a move from pure raiding to settlement and governance, a change that would eventually transform Scandinavian society. As king, Bjorn is said to have ruled over large parts of Sweden. He established trading relationships, consolidated power, and laid the groundwork for the emergence of a unified Swedish kingdom. This period of Bjorn's life shows us another side of the Vikings, not just as warriors and raiders, but as nation builders and rulers. So, what can we learn from Bjorn Ironside's remarkable life? First and foremost, his story teaches us the value of pushing beyond our comfort zones. Bjorn wasn't content with the familiar raids on nearby shores. He dared to sail into unknown waters, facing new challenges and seizing unprecedented opportunities. In your own life, what distant shores could you explore? What comfort zones are holding you back from potentially life-changing adventures? Secondly, Bjorn's tale reminds us of the power of adaptability. Whether he was raiding a Mediterranean city or ruling a Swedish kingdom, Bjorn showed an ability to adapt to new situations and thrive. In our rapidly changing world, this skill is more valuable than ever. How can you cultivate this kind of adaptability in your own life? Thirdly, Bjorn's transition from raider to ruler demonstrates the importance of evolving our roles and responsibilities as we grow. Many of us start our careers or pursuits in one capacity, but over time, we may find ourselves taking on leadership roles or shifting our focus. Bjorn's story encourages us to embrace these changes and rise to new challenges. Lastly, let's not forget the sheer audacity of Bjorn's exploits. The Luna Raid, whether fact or legend, speaks to the power of creative thinking and bold action. When faced with a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, sometimes the most effective solution is the one no one sees coming. In your own challenges, how could you think outside the box like Bjorn and his men? Bjorn Ironside's life reads like an epic saga, filled with daring voyages, clever strategies, and transformative leadership. He expanded the Viking world, both geographically through his Mediterranean raids and culturally through his rule in Sweden. His legacy reminds us that with courage, adaptability, and a dash of audacity, we can sail beyond the horizon of our own limitations and discover new worlds of possibility. Ivar the Boneless, the cunning strategist. Picture a Viking warrior so feared, so ruthless, that his very name struck terror into the hearts of his enemies. Now imagine that this fearsome warrior was known not for his physical prowess, but for his razor-sharp mind and strategic brilliance. This is Ivar the Boneless, perhaps the most enigmatic and formidable of Ragnar Lothbrok's sons. Let's start with the elephant in the room, that peculiar nickname, the Boneless. What could it mean? Theories abound, and each offers a fascinating glimpse into the legend of Ivar. Some suggest it was a reference to a physical condition. Perhaps he suffered from brittle bone disease or was extremely flexible. Others propose it was a mistranslation of a Norse word meaning hated or detested. Still others argue it was a reference to impotence, or conversely, to his reputation as a ladies' man. But perhaps the most intriguing interpretation is that boneless referred not to Ivar's body, but to his mind. His ability to slither out of tight situations, to be unpredictable and adaptable like a snake. This interpretation aligns well with what we know of Ivar's greatest strength, his strategic genius. Now, let's transport ourselves to 9th century England. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms are prosperous but divided, making them ripe targets for Viking raids. Enter Ivar and his brothers, leading what would become known as the Great Heathen Army. This wasn't just another raiding party. It was a full-scale invasion force, bent on conquest and revenge for the death of Ragnar Lothbrok. In 866, Ivar led this army to the city of York, one of the most important cities in northern England. But rather than launching a frontal assault, Ivar employed a strategy of patience and deception. He waited until November 1st, the Feast of All Saints, when he knew the city would be celebrating and its defenses would be low. Under cover of the festivities, Ivar's forces infiltrated York and took it with minimal resistance. This capture of York wasn't just a military victory. It was a masterstroke that established a Viking stronghold in the heart of England, a base from which they could launch further conquests. It demonstrated Ivar's understanding that sometimes the key to victory lies not in brute force, but in timing and opportunism. But Ivar's strategic mind wasn't limited to military matters. He was also a skilled diplomat and politician. After the conquest of York, Ivar didn't simply pillage and move on. Instead, he installed a puppet king and began to establish a Viking-controlled state in northern England. This shift from raiding to ruling marks a significant evolution in Viking strategy, one that would have far-reaching consequences for English history. Ivar's influence extended beyond England as well. According to some accounts, he also led successful campaigns in Ireland, establishing a Viking kingdom in Dublin. This ability to operate on multiple fronts, to see the bigger picture beyond individual battles, is a hallmark of truly great strategists. Now let's pause for a moment and consider what we can learn from Ivar's approach. In our own lives, we may not be leading armies or conquering cities, but we all face challenges that require strategic thinking. How often do we rush headlong into problems, relying on brute force or sheer willpower, when a more measured, strategic approach might yield better results? Ivar's success lay in his ability to analyze situations, identify weaknesses, and strike at the most opportune moment. He understood that timing and preparation were often more important than raw strength. In your own life, how might you apply this principle? When facing a difficult task or challenge, how could you step back, assess the situation, and look for the most strategic path forward? Moreover, Ivar's story teaches us the value of adaptability. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a conqueror, a ruler, a diplomat. He adapted his approach based on the situation at hand. In our rapidly changing world, this kind of flexibility is more valuable than ever. How can you cultivate this adaptability in your own life and career? It's also worth noting that Ivar's greatest strength wasn't his physical prowess, but his mind. In a culture that prized martial skill, Ivar rose to prominence through his intelligence and strategic thinking. Lastly, let's consider the legacy of Ivar the Boneless. His conquests and the Viking settlements he established fundamentally altered the course of English history. The Danelaw, the Viking-controlled area of England, would influence English law, language, and culture for generations to come. This reminds us that our actions, our strategies, can have far-reaching consequences that outlive us. Ivar the Boneless, with his mysterious nickname and brilliant mind, represents a different kind of Viking hero. He shows us that true power often lies not in physical strength, but in the ability to outthink and outmaneuver our challenges. In a world that often glorifies brute force, Ivar's story is a testament to the power of the mind. LAGERTHA, the fierce shield maiden. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: a battlefield in chaos, the clash of steel on steel, the roar of warriors. And there, in the heart of the fray, a woman stands tall, her shield gleaming, her sword flashing. This is LAGERTHA, the shield maiden, a figure who challenges everything we thought we knew about Viking society and the role of women in it. LAGERTHA's tale, as told in the Norse sagas, is one of bravery, independence, and fierce determination. But before we dive into her story, let's take a moment to understand what it meant to be a shield maiden in Viking culture. Shield maidens were women who chose to fight as warriors alongside men. They trained in combat, carried weapons, and participated in raids and battles. The concept of the shield maiden challenges our modern assumptions about gender roles in ancient societies. It suggests that Viking culture, while certainly not egalitarian by today's standards, offered women opportunities for power and agency that were rare in many other contemporary societies. Now let's turn to LAGERTHA herself. According to the sagas, particularly the Gesta Danorum, written by Saxo Grammaticus, LAGERTHA first met RAGNAR LOTHBROK when he came to Norway to avenge his grandfather's death. LAGERTHA, though young, was already known for her fighting skills. She joined Ragnar's army, and her prowess in battle caught his eye. But here's where the story gets truly interesting. After the battle, Ragnar sought out LAGERTHA to propose marriage. However, LAGERTHA wasn't about to make it easy for him. The saga tells us that she set a bear and a hound to guard her home. Ragnar, undeterred, killed the bear with his spear and choked the hound with his bare hands, proving himself worthy of the fierce Shieldmaiden. This tale, whether historically accurate or not, speaks volumes about the character of LAGERTHA and the Viking ideal of a strong woman. She wasn't a prize to be won, but a formidable individual who demanded respect and equality. LAGERTHA and Ragnar married and had several children, including a son named Fridleif, but their relationship was far from simple. The sagas tell us that LAGERTHA eventually divorced Ragnar, maintaining her own lands and title. Later, when Ragnar was in trouble, facing a civil war in Denmark, it was LAGERTHA who came to his aid with 120 ships, turning the tide of battle in his favor. There's a powerful lesson here about the complexity of relationships and the ability to act with grace and loyalty even after a separation. How many of us can say we'd rush to the aid of an ex-partner in their hour of need? But LAGERTHA's story isn't just about her relationship with Ragnar. She's described as a ruler in her own right, governing her lands with wisdom and strength. The sagas paint a picture of a woman who was respected not just for her beauty or her connection to a famous man, but for her own abilities as a warrior and leader. One of the most famous stories about LAGERTHA describes her defending her land from invaders. According to the tale, she led her army in battle, her long hair flowing behind her, inspiring her warriors with her courage. It's said that she struck down over 100 enemy soldiers with her own sword, turning the tide of the battle. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider what LAGERTHA's story means for us today. In a world still grappling with gender equality, LAGERTHA stands as a powerful symbol of female strength and independence. She reminds us that women have always been capable of greatness, of leadership, of courage in the face of adversity. But LAGERTHA's tale isn't just for women. It's a reminder to all of us about the danger of making assumptions based on gender, appearance, or any other surface characteristic. How often do we underestimate people because they don't fit our preconceived notions of what a leader or a hero should look like? Moreover, LAGERTHA's story teaches us about the power of self-belief. In a society that was still largely male-dominated, LAGERTHA carved out a place for herself through sheer force of will and skill. She didn't wait for permission to be strong, to be a leader. She simply was. How might our own lives change if we approached our challenges with that same unshakable self-confidence? LAGERTHA also embodies the Viking ideal of living life on one's own terms. She married when she chose, divorced when she chose, ruled her own lands, and came to the aid of others on her own terms. In our modern world, where we often feel constrained by societal expectations and norms, LAGERTHA's example encourages us to define success and happiness for ourselves. It's important to note that while LAGERTHA is a legendary figure, she represents a very real aspect of Viking society. Archaeological evidence has confirmed that some Viking women did indeed fight alongside men. Warrior graves containing female remains and weapons have been discovered, challenging our understanding of Viking gender roles. LAGERTHA's legacy, then, is not just her own story, but the window she provides into a society that was more complex and nuanced than we often give it credit for. She reminds us that history is rarely as simple as we might think, and that women have been breaking barriers and defying expectations for centuries. HARALD HARDRADA, the last great Viking king. Imagine a man whose life was so full of adventure, conquest, and ambition that it reads like an epic saga. This is HARALD HARDRADA, whose name means hard ruler, a fitting moniker for a man whose iron will and relentless pursuit of power would shape the course of history. Born around 1015 in Norway, Harald's life was destined for greatness from the start. He was half-brother to King Olaf II, later known as Saint Olaf. But Harald's path to power was far from smooth. When Olaf was killed in battle in 1030, the teenage Harald was forced into exile, beginning a journey that would take him across the known world and back again. Let's pause for a moment and put ourselves in young Harald's shoes. Imagine being forced from your home, your family's power stripped away, with nothing but your wits and your warrior skills to rely on. How would you react? For Harold, this setback was just the beginning of an extraordinary adventure. Harold first fled to Kievan Rus, the empire of the Eastern Vikings, where he served in the court of Prince Yaroslav the Wise. But Harold was restless, hungry for glory and riches. So he journeyed on to Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Empire, where he joined the Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard was an elite unit of the Byzantine army, composed primarily of Norse warriors. Here, Harold found his element. He fought in campaigns across the Mediterranean, from Sicily to Syria, earning a fearsome reputation and amassing considerable wealth. Legend has it that he even had a brief romance with a Byzantine princess, though he was forced to leave her behind when he finally returned north. Now, let's consider what Harold's time in the Byzantine Empire tells us. Here was a man who, rather than being crushed by exile, used it as an opportunity to gain experience, wealth, and fame. How often do we view setbacks as the end of the road, rather than as potential springboards to new opportunities? After nearly 15 years abroad, Harold returned to Norway in 1045, his ships laden with gold and his mind filled with ambition. He shared the Norwegian throne with his nephew, Magnus the Good, but not for long. When Magnus died the following year, Harold became sole ruler of Norway. But Norway alone wasn't enough for Harald Hardrada. He set his sights on Denmark, waging a long war against King Svein Estridsson. For nearly 2 decades, Harold led raids into Danish territory, earning his nickname Hardrada, Hard Ruler, for his ruthless tactics. Harold's reign wasn't just about warfare, though. He was also a nation builder, founding the city of Oslo and establishing a coin-based economy in Norway. He was a patron of skalds, poets, and was himself said to be a skilled poet. But Harold's greatest ambition was yet to come. In 1066, he set his sights on the ultimate prize, the throne of England. When Edward the Confessor died without an heir, Harold saw his chance. He assembled a massive fleet, some sources say 300 ships, and set sail for England. At first, fortune seemed to favor Harold. He won a significant victory at the Battle of Fulford. But just days later, he faced King Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. In a twist of fate, Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king, fell in battle, marking the end of the Viking Age. What can we learn from Harald Hardrada's extraordinary life? First, his story teaches us about resilience. From exile to empire, from servant to king, Harold never let setbacks deter him from his ambitions. In your own life, how can you cultivate this kind of resilience? When faced with obstacles, can you, like Harold, see them as opportunities for growth and adventure? Secondly, Harold's life illustrates the power of diverse experiences. His time in the Varangian Guard exposed him to different cultures, military tactics, and ways of thinking. This breadth of experience undoubtedly contributed to his success as a ruler. Thirdly, Harold's story is a testament to the power of ambition. Whether we admire his goals or not, we can't help but be impressed by his relentless pursuit of them. However, Harold's tale also carries a warning. His final fatal campaign for the English throne reminds us that unbridled ambition can lead to downfall. It's a powerful reminder to temper our ambitions with wisdom and to know when enough is enough. Lastly, Harald Hardrada's life encapsulates the Viking Age itself, a time of exploration, conquest, and cultural exchange that left an indelible mark on European history. His death at Stamford Bridge is often seen as the end of the Viking Age, closing a chapter on one of history's most fascinating periods. As we reflect on Harald Hardrada's life, let's consider our own journeys. We may not be conquering kingdoms or leading armies, but we all face our own battles and pursue our own ambitions. How can we bring the Viking spirit of adventure, resilience, and determination to our daily lives? Harald Hardrada's saga reminds us that life is an adventure waiting to be seized. Rollo, the Viking who became a duke. Picture a towering Viking warrior standing on the banks of the Seine River in France. His eyes, once fixed on plunder, now survey the land with the gaze of a ruler. This is Rollo, the Viking who would transform from a feared raider into the first Duke of Normandy, forever changing the course of European history. Born around 860 CE, likely in Norway, Rollo's early life was typical of many Viking warriors. He participated in raids along the coasts of Scotland, England, and France. But Rollo was destined for more than just raiding. He had the ambition and political acumen to carve out a lasting legacy. By the early 10th century, Viking raids had become a constant threat to the Frankish kingdom. The Frankish king, Charles the Simple, faced a dilemma: how to protect his realm from these fierce Norse warriors. His solution would prove to be a masterstroke of diplomacy that would have far-reaching consequences. In 911 CE, Charles made a deal with Rollo. In exchange for protecting the region against other Viking raiders, Rollo would be granted the land that would become Normandy. This agreement, known as the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte, marked a significant shift in Viking-European relations. Let's pause for a moment and consider the magnitude of this change. Rollo, once a feared raider, was now being entrusted with the defense of the very land he had once attacked. How does one make such a dramatic transition? What kind of leadership and vision does it take to go from outsider to ruler? Rollo embraced his new role with characteristic Viking determination. He converted to Christianity, taking the baptismal name Robert, and married a Frankish noblewoman. Yet he didn't completely abandon his Norse heritage. Instead, he created a unique blend of Norse and Frankish culture that would define Normandy for generations to come. Under Rollo's leadership, Normandy flourished. He implemented a feudal system, but with a Norse twist, granting land to his followers in exchange for military service. This system would later influence the development of feudalism throughout Europe. Rollo also proved to be an adept ruler and diplomat. He expanded his territory, sometimes through conquest, sometimes through negotiation. He established laws and customs that brought stability to the region, earning the respect of both his Norse followers and his Frankish subjects. But Rollo's greatest legacy was yet to come. His descendants, the Normans, would go on to play a crucial role in European history. Most famously, Rollo's great-great-great-grandson, William the Conqueror, would invade England in 1066, becoming King of England and fundamentally altering the course of English history. So, what can we learn from Rollo's remarkable transformation from raider to ruler? First, his story teaches us about the power of adaptability. Rollo successfully navigated a dramatic change in circumstances, transitioning from outsider to insider, from attacker to defender. In our rapidly changing world, this ability to adapt and thrive in new circumstances is more valuable than ever. Furthermore, Rollo's tale reminds us of the importance of vision and leadership. He didn't just accept the land granted to him, he built it into a powerful and prosperous duchy. He had the foresight to blend Norse and Frankish cultures, creating something new and enduring. Moreover, Rollo's story illustrates the potential for personal growth and transformation. He evolved from a raider focused on short-term gain to a ruler concerned with long-term stability and prosperity. Lastly, Rollo's legacy teaches us about the far-reaching consequences of our actions. When he accepted Charles's offer, he couldn't have known that his descendants would one day rule England. Yet his decision set in motion a chain of events that would reshape European history. This reminds us to consider the long-term impact of our decisions and actions. Rollo's transformation from Viking raider to Norman Duke is a testament to the complexity of history and human nature. He was a man who could adapt, lead, and build, turning a life of raiding into a legacy of rulership. His story challenges our assumptions about identity and change, reminding us that we are not bound by our past, but can reshape our future through vision, determination, and adaptability. Rollo's saga reminds us that the greatest adventures often come not from conquering new lands, but from transforming ourselves and our communities. Are you ready to embark on your own journey of transformation? The Red Family, pioneers of the North Atlantic. Imagine a family so adventurous, so daring, that they redrew the map of the known world. This is the saga of Erik the Red, his son Leif Erikson, and his daughter Freydis Eriksdottir, a Viking family whose exploits would shape the course of history and expand the horizons of European exploration. Our story begins with Erik the Red, a man whose fiery hair matched his tempestuous nature. Born in Norway around 950 CE, Erik's family was forced to relocate to Iceland after his father was exiled for manslaughter. It seems the apple didn't fall far from the tree, as Erik himself would later face similar troubles in Iceland, becoming embroiled in several violent disputes that led to his own exile. But where others might have seen catastrophe, Erik saw opportunity. Banished from Iceland for 3 years, he set his sights on rumors of land to the west. In a bold move that would define his legacy, Erik sailed into the unknown and discovered a vast, largely ice-covered land. Spending his years of exile exploring this new territory, Erik mapped its coastline and identified areas suitable for settlement. Upon returning to Iceland, Erik dubbed his discovery Greenland, perhaps the first example of Viking marketing genius. While there were indeed some green areas suitable for farming, much of the land was covered in ice. Nevertheless, Erik's enthusiastic promotion attracted settlers eager for a fresh start. In 985 CE, Erik led a fleet of 25 ships back to Greenland. Though only 14 completed the perilous journey, it was enough to establish the first European settlement on Greenland. Erik settled in Brattahlid, in what became known as the Eastern Settlement. Despite the harsh Arctic environment, the colony thrived under Erik's leadership, lasting for nearly 500 years. Now let's turn our attention to Erik's son, Leif Erikson, who would take his father's spirit of exploration even further. Born in Iceland around 970 CE, Leif grew up in Greenland, surrounded by tales of exploration and new lands. Around the year 1000 CE, Leif embarked on a voyage that would etch his name in the annals of history. Having heard tales of land to the west from a merchant, Leif set sail to investigate. His journey took him to several previously unknown lands. The first he named Helluland, or Stone Slab Land, thought to be modern-day Baffin Island. Next came Markland, or Forest Land, likely the coast of Labrador. But it was the third land that truly captured Leif's attention. He called this place Vinland, or Wineland, due to the abundance of wild grapes, or possibly berries, found there. This is believed to be somewhere on the coast of Newfoundland, or possibly further south. In doing so, Leif Erikson became the first European to set foot on North American soil, nearly 500 years before Columbus. Leif and his crew established a small settlement in Vinland, building houses and exploring the surrounding area. While this initial settlement was short-lived, Leif's discovery opened up a new chapter in human history, bridging the gap between the old world and the new. But the story of this remarkable family doesn't end there. Erik's daughter, Freydis Eriksdottir, would carve out her own place in Viking history. Born in Greenland around 970 CE, Freydis grew up in a world of exploration and adventure. But unlike many women of her time, she wasn't content to stay at home while the men sailed off to new lands. Freydis first entered the historical record as part of her brother Leif's expeditions to Vinland. But it's her own later expeditions that truly set her apart. Around 1010 CE, Freydis organized and led her own voyage to Vinland, becoming one of the few women in Viking history to command such an expedition. The sagas paint a picture of Freydis as a woman of extraordinary courage and ferocity. One famous story tells of her confronting native inhabitants in Vinland while pregnant. As her male companions began to flee, Freydis stood her ground. She reportedly picked up a fallen man's sword and, baring her breast, struck it with the flat of the blade, letting out a fierce battle cry that drove off the attackers. Whether this specific incident occurred exactly as described or not, it speaks to Freydis's reputation for bravery and her refusal to be limited by societal expectations of women. She was a leader who led from the front, unafraid to face danger head-on. The achievements of this remarkable family, Eric the Red, Leif Erikson, and Freydis Eiriksdottir, reshaped the Viking world and beyond. Eric turned exile into opportunity, founding the first European settlement in Greenland. Leif pushed the boundaries of exploration even further, becoming the first European to reach North America. And Freydis challenged gender norms, leading her own expeditions and facing down threats with unmatched courage. Together, they embody the Viking spirit of exploration, resilience, and daring. Eric showed us how to turn setbacks into opportunities. Leif reminded us that there are always new horizons to discover if we have the courage to sail towards them. And Freydis taught us that determination and bravery know no gender. Their legacy challenges us to question our own limitations. The story of the Red family is more than just a tale of Viking exploration. It's a reminder that with courage, vision, and determination, we can redraw the maps of our own lives, pushing beyond the known and comfortable into new realms of possibility. Their saga challenges us to embrace the explorer within, to face our fears, and to set sail for our own undiscovered lands. As we've journeyed through the lives of these famous Vikings, we've seen how their legacy has shaped our world in ways we might not have imagined. From their bold explorations that expanded our understanding of the globe to their influence on language, law, and culture, the Viking impact resonates to this day. But perhaps the most valuable legacy of the Vikings is the spirit they embody, a spirit of adventure, resilience, and innovation. In our modern world, we may not be sailing longships or wielding battle axes, but we face our own challenges and uncharted territories. So I ask you, how will you channel your inner Viking? Will you dare to explore new horizons in your personal or professional life? Will you face adversity with the resilience of a Norse warrior? Will you innovate and adapt like the settlers of Greenland and Normandy? The lessons of the Viking Age are not confined to history books. They live on in each of us, waiting to be awakened. So, go forth and conquer your own challenges, explore your own new worlds, and leave your own lasting legacy. Before you go, I'd like to share a brief story about another ancient culture that, like the Vikings, left an indelible mark on history: the Celts. These fierce warriors and skilled craftsmen once dominated much of Europe, their influence stretching from Ireland to Turkey. Their intricate art, complex mythology, and fierce independence challenged the might of even the Roman Empire. If you're intrigued by the parallels between Celtic and Viking cultures, I encourage you to check out our video on the Celts, Europe's ancient warriors, appearing on your screen now. And remember, your support makes videos like this possible. If you enjoyed this journey through Viking history, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a comment with your thoughts or ideas for future videos, and if you're able, making a donation to support our work. Your engagement helps us continue to bring history to life. Thank you for joining me on this Viking adventure. Until next time, Skull.